Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the MTech office hours for September 7th. Just going to give everyone a few minutes to get settled in, and then we get started. If you wouldn't mind, please putting your name and the county you're from in the chat box so we can see who's in the room. Some of our team members, if the team wants to take a moment to just briefly introduce yourselves. This is from the CAR team, which is the Center of Applied Research. So my name is David Lopez. I'm a TA Technical Assistant Specialist with that. I'll turn it over to my partner, Danielle, if you want to say a quick hello.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Danielle Ragib. I'm also a Training and Technical Assistance Specialist on this Medi-Cal Mobile Crisis Benefit Project and at the TA Center. I'll popcorn it to Andrew.
Thanks, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Haw, and I'm the project manager for the MTech team. And I'll pass it to, I think Miranda's on.
I am. Good morning, everybody. Miranda March. I'm the project director. Lovely to see so many of you represented and looking forward to a great conversation today.
Moving forward to our additional partners, we have our Health Management and Associates, our HMA team. I know Suzanne is on the call. If you want to say a quick hello, Suzanne.
Yes, good morning. It's good to see all of you today. We're just going to be more of a participant and hear all the good things that you all have to share.
Thank you, Suzanne. And our other partner, Kaufman and Associates, the CAI team. I know Josh is on. Josh, please introduce yourself.
Bonjour, good morning, everybody. I'm Josh. I work with Kaufman and Associates. I serve as a tribal behavioral health advisor, and I'm a partner to the CARS and HMA teams. And happy to be in this space. So good to see everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. Moving forward, we're going to go ahead and start with what we're going to be on the agenda today. We're going to go over the implementation plan, some updates on how to access the required and recommended trainings that have already been released. We're going to go over briefly the standardized tool revision process, where are we at currently with the brief assessment crisis, the brief crisis assessment tool, dispatch tool, and the safety planning guide. The big part, what we want to hear is we heard you in our last meetings and even in our TA requests. And so what we wanted to do is bring some experts from the field that are actually doing the work right now to help us lead the conversation around what they're doing in regard to safety, how their dispatch protocols are going, how their mobile crisis teams are actually operating in real time, that have been doing something very similar to this new mobile crisis benefit prior to even being launched. And then we will close it off with a Q&A session at the end for all of us to just have that. So starting off with the implementation plan, I'm sure many of you have got those email blasts from us and DHCS, letting everyone know that the implementation plan was out and released. It is available. The implementation plan template and instructions are available on our website, and that is at our Medi-Cal Mobile Crisis TA Center. Andrew just dropped it in the link if you haven't seen it. And Andrew was actually going to, I believe, are you going to show this part, Andrew, or the next one?
Next one.
Got it. You could go there for that link, and then we're going to go into our website slides right now. Okay. Now this is how to access the current trainings that have been already delivered. And so, as you know, there are various required trainings that are required for the mobile crisis benefit. All trainings are announced through the MTech newsletter that have links to the different registrations. The trainings are located at the MTech website. Current trainings that are up are the core trainings are crisis assessment, trauma-informed care, harm reduction, safety planning, and we're working on the crisis intervention and de-escalation training, which is scheduled later this month, not this week. Andrew, if you'd like to share the website itself, and that's at camobilecrisis.org. And I'll give him a moment to do so, and you can see how we can actually access both live.
Yeah, and I can walk through this for you, David. So we're just sharing this slide. I know a lot of you have been accessing this website, but we did have some recent changes in the last few days. And so just wanted to highlight some of these key changes. The first big one you can see here is that in the front page where we've added and updated a lot of the languaging around the required core trainings, required enhanced trainings, and also the recommended supplemental trainings. We also added a new link here for the required training list. And so, trying to constantly keep this updated with all of the ongoing trainings and events. The two big things I wanted to highlight, though, is that for the archive trainings, just to make it easier to navigate, we've actually broken it down to 1, the archive required trainings, and then 2, the archived recommended supplemental trainings. That way, it's easier for all of county staff who are accessing to know directly, okay, which one are the required trainings and which one are just are part of the recommended ones. And so, you can click in here and you can see these are all the required trainings that we have thus far. Just one correction, we are still working on getting the safety plan uploaded. We're currently going through, the closed captioning and making sure that it is accessible in that. But here you can see we also added some instructions for upon completion of the recorded trainings. We do ask that you just email our mobile crisis info@carsrp.org with just the subject line certificate of completion, training name, and then the date completed. And our team will be able to get these certificates of completions to you for the recorded trainings. As of now, this is kind of just the temporary workaround as our team tries to find a more streamlined way for you to be able to request these certificates. Also, if you have any questions around like what are the updated list of trainings, we have a link here. And if you click on it, it will take you to this PDF that we shared previously around the breakdown of what are the topics, what category they fall under. And then lastly, just really quick, on the top here, you can see there's a new tab for the implementation plan. And here you can download the template, the instructions, and also below there's some more information around, the due dates for when the implementation needs to be submitted, as well as if you're, interested in submitting an attestation letter. And at the bottom, there's submission instructions, which is also in the instructions template when you download it.
That being said, going over the standardized tool update. So we did have initial drafts of the crisis assessment, the dispatch and triage protocol, and the safety planning tool go out. Those drafts went out, and we were asking for feedback from the different counties, or from all counties. We received feedback, and now we're currently in the process of streamlining, taking that feedback and really condensing and consolidating those tools into something that's really more effective for everyone here in the county. And then we'll, as we refine it, we'll be able to hopefully condense it so they do actually meet the spirit of what they are. So the brief crisis assessment tool, as we were developing it, kind of just continued to grow and grow with all these great points and inputs. But now, how do we actually make it so it's something effective that can be used in the field by anyone from that mobile crisis team? Same thing with dispatch and triage. We're definitely looking across the nation and even leaning on our internal experts to see, what has been utilized in other areas. What's 988 using when they're looking at when they're going to discharge for the dispatch and triage protocols? What are other counties using currently? What worked for them? And how can we really integrate that? One partner, as we look at these tools that have been developed, a lot of us were actually looking at the county dispatchers at the 911 level. What are they screening for, and how do they look for different risks? So making sure we're getting a full encompassing picture of everything that we can deliver that over to you all. That's really good. Same thing over with the safety planning. So we're working on those right now. And we also want to note that once that is released, we'll send it out for final review, and then those can either be adopted by your counties or just want to make sure that we note that any county can come up with their own county or behavioral health agencies can develop their own standardized tool, and it just needs to be submitted to DHCS for their approval. So that's that. And now we're moving on To the biggest portion of today's meeting, and I'll introduce our panelists. And I put the counties. I know Bethany's going to have a clarification because she just actually, I'll let her say it. But for our panels today, we really wanted to bring in some experts from the field that have been doing mobile crisis response without law enforcement, and what's that look like for the counties itself. And when we were canvassing in different counties, we were researching who's been doing it, what's the unique challenges. I was lucky enough to meet and gather these folks with us. Bethany Shakespeare, who was from Madera County. And if I say anyone's name wrong, I am so sorry. I'm going to do my best to get through it. From San Diego, we have Alicia Efekari, Brenois Lane, Kamika Smith, Mary Woods, and Megan Patrick Thompson. And what we want to do, we're going to turn it over to them, starting off by asking them some questions, just having a regular, and hopefully this information can help drive and lead you all into what's actually working for your county itself. So I'll turn it over, and if you all want to just introduce yourselves to the panel, to the meeting members right now, I'll turn it over, then we'll move on to the next slide.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bethany Shakespeare. I apologize. I'm losing my voice right now. Like David said, I've been in Madera County for this past year, implementing their mobile crisis team there. I am in transition right now, going back to San Luis Obispo County, where I had previously been working, doing mobile crisis services there as well.
Morning, I'm Alicia Efekari with Behavioral Health Services, San Diego County, and I'm the Assistant Medical Services Administrator who's been helping support our mobile crisis response team here in San Diego, which we started about 2.5 years in now. Bree, do we want to just go in order?
Yes, and I'm going to cover for Bree. Bree's listening in, but she is actually working a crisis right now. Imagine that. So, Kamika, you'll be next.
Morning, everyone. Kamika Smith, Behavioral Health Program Coordinator with San Diego County Behavioral Health Services, helping to support the MCRT program.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Woods, Regional Director for MCRT here in San Diego, Telecare. And I will be also speaking for Bree Lane today. She's listening in, but she can't participate. She is the Program Manager Administrator for the program.
Good morning, and I'm Megan Patrick Thompson. I am the Program Director with Exodus Recovery's Mobile Crisis Response Team that covers the North Coastal region of San Diego County.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves, and I want to go ahead and get us started with just kind of these open discussion panel topics. Where we get started is, how long has your county been operating a behavioral health mobile crisis team? I know San Diego just alluded to it, but I'll let you speak to it. We want to learn how are your teams currently comprised, and let's see, if we can speak a little bit about some current staffing patterns. So starting from the top, go with, how long have your counties been operating a behavioral health mobile crisis team? San Diego, was that 2 years, or how long? How did it come apart?
Yeah, so our mobile crisis response team started January of 2021 was when we had our first calls that we responded to. Prior to that, for like 20 years, our county has had a co-response model, a psychiatric emergency response team, which helped us sort of start at the starting point for our mobile crisis response team. But yeah, we're 2.5 years now, going strong.
Thank you. And Bethany, how was Madera's team? How did it come about? Or if you want to speak to either one of the counties you've worked with.
Yeah, so with Madera County, we launched it about a year ago now. It came through the CCMU grant funding. And so we were able to establish it and really launch everything throughout the last year. And then in San Luis Obispo County, Sierra Mental Wellness Group runs the crisis services there. And I believe they're coming on about 9 years now doing mental health evaluations in that county.
Okay, thank you. Now, moving on with that is like, how are your teams currently comprised, Bethany? Like when you look at when that mobile crisis response that you said that started up with the CCMU grantees, would you be able to speak to how that team came about and who's on that team?
Sure, yes. So the teams are comprised of a co-response team with 2 members. There's always a clinician on the team. And then we have what I refer to as support staff. So that can be case managers, SUD counselors, peer support, LPTs, any of the additional team members who are there. And the delineation between the two is that our clinicians are the ones who are designated if a 5150 hold is needed. And then the other team members provide their scope of practice as well.
Thank you. And then popcorning it over to San Diego, same question.
Yeah, I can take that. So here in San Diego, both Telecare and Exodus's models model each other. And so we have a 3-member team. We always have a licensed clinician that goes out on a call. We have a master's level case manager, and then we have a peer support specialist as part of our team.
So always 3 members go out with your teams in San Diego. For Madera, it was a 2-team composition. Did I got that right?
Yeah, I'll add. Hi, this is Mary. I'll add a little bit to that. Yes, that's our model, 3 teams. And, Exodus MCRT and Telecare MCRT in San Diego operate sort of seamlessly. So the end user, the client doesn't see a difference. But there are times that if someone calls in or whatnot, we can run a minimum of a 2-person team, but that's not ideal. But even on a 2-person team, you still have to have a licensed clinician. And it is our licensed clinician that will do the hold if a hold is needed.
Thank you for that. And then currently staffing, knowing that the new mobile crisis benefit is really, it's moving towards a 24/7 coverage, which we know we've heard a lot of different concerns about how do we staff that? How do we do that? What are your current staffing patterns in the counties that you represent, and how did you build up to that? And if you're not 24/7, how are you going to get them?
So for San Diego County, we started with a pilot, slow, like business hours, and then slow in one region of the county. And then we slowly ramped up to the other regions throughout our county, to all 6 regions, and to a 24-hour model. And we actually have the same staffing pattern that we mentioned earlier, a team of 3. That's our model, and that are operating 24 hours. We track and trend and do analysis to determine like where the vehicles should be stationed throughout the county and the call volume to know how many teams may be at different hours. But yes, we are 24 hours, and that's our staffing. Same model overnight.
And I think what we found early on is that at first our teams are working 8-hour shifts, and we quickly, realized in the pilot that caused some, struggles with operating, expanded hours. And so I know, we moved to 10 and 12-hour shifts to kind of make it more seamless for our staff to cover the 24-hour.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. We did something similar because we're finding with this model, the staff prefer the 10 or 12-hour shift model. And it also works, it's a little easier for management to manage when you're doing 24 hours, right? Because there's a lot of coordination. I'll also add that as far as our teams currently, the Telecare MCRT is contracted right now to be running 29 teams a week. And Megan, I'll speak for you. I think you're doing 10 teams a week. And so for a county, this is a very large county. And, so that's 39 teams a week. San Diego County is running 24-hour shifts, 24-hour days, whatever.
Yeah, definitely hearing that. So heard the ramp up, it took some time to do that. And then you quickly shifting away from the traditional 8-hour work shift for coverage need. The team I served on was a 410s, but we weren't 24/7. Bethany, how does that sound for you, and what's it like in your area or the areas you served in?
Yeah, so in Madera County, the day shift is covered by BHS staff, so through the county. So they have the 8-hour shifts, and then it's contracted for the after hours. So nights, weekends, and holidays. The contractors, they have 8-hour shifts as well. So they do a knock or a night shift and a knock shift, providing that extra layer of service there. In San Luis Obispo County, we have the day shift, which is the 8-hour long shift, and then the night shift, which is 16 hours long. And so they work as a, per diem. The difference there is a lot of people live in San Luis Obispo County, and there's a good population both North and South County. So it's pretty easy to staff both ends of the county. Whereas in Madera County, there's not as many professionals and there's a lot of rural areas. And so, for instance, our mountainous area up in Oakhurst towards Yosemite, we don't have a plethora of clinicians up there at this time. And so, so having our team right now, they're more based in the county seat in Madera City, and then dispatching from there, the goal being to have eventually 4 teams and 1 stationed up in the Chowchilla region, 1 in the city, 1 in the valley, and 1 up in the mountains. But at this point, due to staffing, we're more so at about 2, almost 3 teams that have been dispatched from there.
Yeah, and one thing I heard both of you say is that understanding that where people are actually located to be able to meet the needs of your vast counties, and understanding that tracking trend and where people are staging, it sounds like, or kind of hanging around different hubs, if that's what it sounds like. Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just elaborate. Bethany, you made me think of this, so thank you. As Alicia mentioned, we have 6 regions here in San Diego. San Diego's pretty far and wide. There are parts of the county that are very heavily populated, and parts of the county that are very sparsely populated. And we have to get to all our calls in under an hour. So our model is to operate mobile offices or mobile teams all the time. So we have a main office. That's kind of located centrally in the city. But, if you go to our North County inland, that's a good hour and a half away from our main office. So we have a team. We've negotiated with our local partners, law enforcement, libraries, what have you, to park our mobile office that has desks that pull out and all that in those locations. So when a call comes through, we can dispatch the call from our dispatch center straight to the mobile team in the van in the mobile office, and they go to the call close to their location. So we get there in under an hour. And we have those mobile offices or mobile vans, whatever you would like to call them, scattered throughout the county. And all the staff aren't sitting at the main office waiting for a call to come in.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really important. I know in the county that we served in, we often used to stage co-located at different law enforcement agencies, or even would stage, as you mentioned, a central location, so we could try to meet and deploy as quickly as possible in some of our less populated areas. I'm glad to hear that this strategy is working for both of you. Really going back and understanding that these teams are really without or out there on their own, right? How does that support look like? It's really going to bring us to this next question, is looking at provider safety. One of the things we continue to hear is, how are we keeping the team safe out there? What questions are we asking? Who's taking those calls? So really wanting to gather some more information around what dispatch protocols you all have established. How did you come to that? How is that working? What information is gathered and examples of what those questions look like. So if anyone wants to add into that.
I know in San Diego, when we started, I think one of the great things that we did was we met with our law enforcement partners and kind of came up with an agreed upon set of safety criteria for our teams, and also really drilled down into what the definitions of those were, because we quickly learned what we saw as aggressive and what they saw as aggressive might have been different definitions. So we really had to come up with operational this is the criteria. What is a weapon? We all have different ideas. So the understanding that everyone has a kitchen, but what we're really looking for is when people are wielding, a knife as part of the call. So I think that those early on conversations really helped us all come together. And then, when Telecare came on board, we also had those conversations of what our, different legal entities definitions were, and making sure that we were all operationally on the same page through the county with our partners. And then really drilling down to what were non-negotiables, what safety questions had to be cleared in order for MCRT to respond in the community safely. You can see those safety concerns right there. Those are the ones that we, adhere to. And if we can't clear those questions, then our teams can't respond. And we, keep very tight on that referral criteria.
And it's kind of a tiered system in San Diego. So our dispatch, we call it the call center, has associate licensed clinicians with licensed clinicians supervising on shift to take every call. They're taking calls from our Access and Crisis Line, or 988. The Access and Crisis Line in San Diego, 988, has been trained to ask the same safety concerns, and then we get that cleared to say, did you ask these concerns? We're also doing that with 911. We've worked with the 11 agencies here in town to make sure they're clearing the calls for us too. So it's kind of a tiered approach to screening for safety, to assure. It's just doubly important to do this, I think, when you're going out the way all our programs are going out, and we don't have weapons. We aren't with police. If needed, police will support us. So we have protocols in place to have law enforcement. If we get out there and the situation changes in any way, shape, or form, there's a protocol in place for how we notify law enforcement to get backup or help. So we have that in place. We've just done, I can't begin to tell you how important safety is. And we've just done so much training around safety. We have quite a few protocols in place for the teams around safety. So when we do our satisfaction surveys, we get pretty good feedback from our employees that they feel like we've got what we need in place around safety, but it's because we're constantly talking about it. We have very formal debriefs on challenging calls. That's something else we do, to say what went right, what didn't go right, how do we do it different next time, what did we miss, that kind of thing. So I think that helps. And then I think regarding safety devices, so in San Diego, our programs are using a duress device that they carry with them. So imagine a pager from the old days, the early 90s pager. It looks like that. It's pretty inconspicuous. If someone was to brandish a weapon on you, you could easily press that button, and the person brandishing the weapon won't even know that you pressed it. It geolocates. So you've got longitude, latitude, it'll say the name of the person. It goes to our call center so we can get 911 out there in an emergency. I'm knocking on wood. We've never needed to use it. It is the very last thing we're going to implement, and we would only implement it in a situation with immediate harm. But we do use those duress devices. We, between Exodus and Telecare, we piloted and went through several kinds. So if you're interested, we can give you information on what worked for us. We did find, if you're looking at duress devices for your teams, some will say that they can have the ability to hear your voice and patch your voice through to 911, and they can hear what's happening. We found that those don't work at all. So don't recommend those. And then again, we've done a lot with law enforcement. Megan touched on this. San Diego worked with us in the early days of the project, we met with all law enforcement agencies weekly, and we met with them for a year every week for about an hour and a half. So there was it was a work group. They had a lot of input and they actually taught us a lot of things. So we send a team of 3 out, right? But you have to be aware of your situational awareness. There's a lot of training done around that, but you don't have all 3 walk in and stand around the client and provide service. So everybody's sort of spaced out. They can see each other, but they aren't all like really close together, which would allow easier egress if they needed to get out faster. So we've done a lot about where do you stand when you enter a home? Where do you stand? What is the role of each person on a call? How do you determine that before the call starts? So we've done a lot of training around that too.
And I'll tack on a couple of other things that I think are important to consider. One is learning your county as well, of areas that are maybe more of a safety concern. That was one of the things coming to Madera County and not having been from the area, that was very important for me, was learning a little bit more about the different regions. And then with that tacks on the areas that are more rural and where, for instance, cell phone service is no longer available. There's a lot of very, very rural areas, especially in the mountain areas, where you lose service. You're going down a one-way dirt road, and just working around, just brainstorming how to work through those processes as well.
Interesting point, knowing that, this is my area in Fresno County, and knowing that, that cell service, I'm sure that's something that any county that can have, right? It's like you're starting to drop service. How do you work around that? Kind of goes back to the safety devices, just a question, and this is something I don't know, is do those safety devices work even in those areas that may not have that traditional cell service, or how does that work?
They do. Now, I'm not a technological expert on how it works, but we've tested it and it does work. I think because it's based on satellite. We also equip our mobile teams with satellite phones for exactly what Bethany's speaking about. We go way out into the desert. Our cell phones aren't going to work. So each vehicle has a satellite phone. If the phone's down, they can at least get connected in an emergency using that.
I would add too that we have a Beacon CAD system that we use to dispatch our teams. And so our dispatch teams are back in the office and they're live watching our, cars in motion. And, if a team is on a call too long or it's taking longer than anticipated, our teams are checking in with them to make sure they're safe. We also have here that we do law enforcement notification calls when we're going into their jurisdiction and letting them know our MCRT, is at a location, and then we clear the call. So, we're also watching our teams in, live action and, watch it, for safety too.
Is that part of the same technology, or is it a different technology package that you guys are using?
Different.
What's the name of that system? I'm sure counties were wondering, asking for a friend, hey.
Yeah, it's Beacon. It's called Beacon. I can put a link in the chat. It's managed by a company. We've subcontracted with a company called MedTech. And they provide the services for rural emergency response throughout the nation, but they're specifically now working with mobile crisis teams throughout the nation. And it is amazing because we dispatch all our calls through Beacon. It tracks when the team arrives, how long the team was on scene, when the team leaves the scene, and all that data comes back through to the program. So you can see every point of contact. And like Megan said, you can see on the map where your team is located at any given time. So if I was to go on, and what's really nice is you can do it at your computer, but you can also do it at your cell phone. So if I'm at home in the middle of the night and I'm watching what's going on, and for some reason I am supervising or needing something, providing some kind of oversight, I can see what the team is doing either from my computer, laptop, or my cell phone.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Really cool this technology is out there. And then what I am hearing though, and just to kind of reframe, there was check-ins almost weekly with law enforcement to kind of establish some of these protocols and let them know, when they were referring people over to your team, like what the referral process was, so everyone was there. There's a location there's a location protocol when you're going to enter their jurisdiction, letting them know that your mobile crisis team is being deployed to this area. And that way, if there is any safety concerns, at least they're on notice, for lack of a better terms, to know that your team's in that area if they do need to respond for safety. And then that the dispatch centers, the teams are either crisis clinicians or tied into 988 itself in some way, and they're running that de-escalate, that initial intake per se, and then running that screening and then determining what teams go where. Does that sound like a good synopsis of everything that I've captured so far, or did I miss it?
Sounds like everything.
All right, thank you. And then Bethany, one point, just for the teams up there in the mountain areas, was there any workaround at that point, like the sat phones? Because I think that was a really nice idea. Hadn't heard of that or even thought of it, even though I got one when I go hiking.
Right. Yeah. So we've looked into the satellite phones. We've also looked into having a extender added to the vehicles, a cell phone extender. And then the other thing that they're looking into now is getting radios that connect to law enforcement. So they're on the same channels as law enforcement and can patch right into their.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I will say, I think that's dependent on your county probably and the agencies. We did early on talk about being able to be connected directly to law enforcement so they could see us through their Beacon CAD system. And we could see them and they could hear our calls and we could hear their calls. But because of various levels of bureaucracy, that's not able to happen right now, but maybe someday in the future.
Thank you for the transparency around that. And then, so one of those, as we look at, we're screening against those following safety concerns, what are and looking at, there's no injuries or they're not requesting or requiring a medical response, that they're having no weapons. Really appreciate the conversation on what is a weapon and how is that involved. I love the point of, if you're responding to a house, like kitchen knives or those things, but is the person having it, wielding it, making threats with it, understanding those definitions there. The no threat of immediate violence towards self or others, so making sure that safety, and then that law enforcement isn't specifically requested. How does the team become comfortable asking these types of questions, or how do they gather that type of information when that initial call for crisis support is initiated?
So for us, it's done in that dispatch process when a request is coming through. First of all, being a brand new program in Madera, we have gone out and talked to other agencies of here's how to get a hold of us, here's questions we're going to ask. So they're aware that these are going to be coming up, but we also recognize that, someone calling in requesting crisis services might be having their own mini crisis as well and aren't going to think of everything. So we're asking it through our dispatch process. My little kitschy phrase that I'll use when I'm doing the training is, if you feel like you can't wait for us to respond, then it's more likely a 911 call. And so those are they having a medical emergency and you need an ambulance to arrive right away? Are they in the middle of a violent episode or on the verge of a violent episode, and you need law enforcement there for safety purposes? Are they at risk of taking off and going AMA, and they're not going to be sitting there safely waiting for us to arrive in 30 minutes or whatnot? And basically the bottom line is, we don't have sirens wailing and lights flashing. We have to obey every traffic law, and we'll get there as soon as we reasonably can. But if you feel like you can't wait for our arrival, then really it needs to be a 911 call.
Yeah, I really love you. Sorry, cut you off. Go ahead, Mary.
I was just saying, we do it similarly.
I would just add something that our team does is, on their way to the call, the clinician will often call and give the person like an ETA. And at that point, we also check in with safety, because sometimes people might underreport to get the referral process through. And so our team will always kind of check in, has anything changed, and get that information too on the way to a call.
Does that happen? Does that team check in? Like, let's say, because things change. Let's say your response time's an hour. Does that call go out like 10 minutes before, 15 minutes before the expected arrival, or what's your procedure around that?
Yeah, it usually happens once the team is deployed. So if there's a delay, our dispatchers will tell like, hey, our team is on another call and it's looking like this time somebody's going to call you from a blocked number to let you know when the team has an ETA and when they're en route to your house. And then at that point, we check in. We also, coach them. Our dispatchers will coach them if anything changes and you need an immediate response to call 911. If there's going to be a time where it's going to be a longer time. And I know Telecare does the same thing too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes then you get some additional information or things shift and change in a crisis, right? The call might have come in and have been an appropriate time call at the moment, but then, things can kind of, change and shift as well.
Another thing that we'll do sometimes is we let them know, hey, if we're all out dispatched and we don't have the capability to remain on the phone with them, we'll encourage them to call 988 so that they have somebody that they can talk to while waiting for us to get there. And so that's a conversation that I reached out to David to set up to make sure that we were on the same page, that if they got calls, and then we also tell the caller, let them know you have already called the mobile crisis team, that they're en route, but you just need someone to talk to while you're waiting until they arrive.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that we could help support in that function for you. Okay. This was kind of touched on a little bit already, especially when you talked about like who's on scene first. So how does the team work collaboratively with the client, knowing that it's teams of 2 to 3? What does that look like? Because that staging, Mary, you kind of touched on it, like understanding that proximity and there's the need for a potential egress. But also, like when I'm thinking of a team member or teams coming up to someone in crisis, we don't want to be overwhelming them as well. So how does that work? And what's the training or what's your protocols around that? I would like to learn a little bit more.
Well, the training is one of the trainings. We offer several, but one of them is really about situational awareness. It's about looking at the space provided in front of you. So you're not just looking at the person served, but you're looking at the environment that they live in. You're looking for weapons around. You're looking for even drug paraphernalia that might be a dirty needle that someone could get stuck on. It doesn't mean we won't provide the service. It just means we're going to be careful. So we're also looking at who else is in the room. Is there privacy for this person? What do we think is going to be best for them so they don't escalate? Say mom's in the room and by chance we're watching the situation escalate because of things mom is saying. So we will, for lack of a better way of saying it, divide and conquer, where the case manager may take mom aside, the peer and the licensed clinician might say, hey, if you'd like some more privacy, we have an office in our vehicle. We can just sit out there in the front and it's comfortable and we can have a conversation and you can tell us what you need. So depending on the situation, we might invite them out to the van. It is an office. It's a very large transit van, similar to what you'd see Amazon come up to your house in. And it's been retrofitted to be a comfortable kind of office space in the back. And we'll meet people out there. But if we're sitting in their home, we don't have everybody sitting on a couch facing the client. We'll have someone maybe at the kitchen table with their computer looking up resources. We'll have the licensed clinician actually doing the assessment. We might have the peer counselor bringing up lived experience that they are that they're familiar with and will help the person stay calm or maybe talk to a family member. I know it's not always I like to say it's not always the licensed clinician that leads the team. I'll talk about a call early on that I went on. So I'm an LMFT. I've been working in San Diego County with behavioral health for over 30 years. So I got lots of experience. And I went on a call and the peer specialist on the call, her name was Randy. She doesn't mind me sharing the story. We've shared it many times. And there was case manager too. And the call was for a vet who had just been honorably discharged from the military. And that's a very difficult time for vets. The move to civilian life is very difficult. And Randy happened to be a vet. And she, she had shared with me in the past how that was just a very difficult time. So I said, Randy, would you like to lead this call? You start, you engage the person. You can introduce me after you kind of create a bond, and I'll sort of stand aside and smile and, be engaging, but you can do the talking. And we did, and it went really very well. I think it was a different approach than I would have taken, but it worked for him. It's what he needed, right? So you have to think about what the person needs, what their environment's like, what their background is. But before you get to your location, the team has talked who's leading this call based on the information we have about the family and about the client. And it might be the licensed person who leads the call. It might not. It might be the peer specialist. Where are we going to stand? If we have some sense of the environment, if it's a family home, we might want to sit on the porch, and then one of the person looking up the information, whether it's the case manager or the licensed person or the peer, they'll be in the computer pulling up resources based on what they've told us. So they make the decision on who stands where and who's leading and who's speaking first before they get on scene.
And I'll say having such a diverse team has really opened up clients to maybe who would have declined our services because of their experiences with behavioral health, but because we have peers on our teams and they have been able to connect with the clients and bring them into the conversation, our overall decline for talking to us is pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful feedback. Bethany, anything to add?
No, it's very similar as far as, really just watching how the client is, how the family is, and responding in ways that engage them. There are times that you have to be a little bit tougher on them to help maintain the situation. There are times that you have to soften your approach. And so it's really, I like how Danielle said it in the chat of it's very person-centered. And, just modifying as we go, knowing that we're our own biggest tool. The other thing when it comes to safety in the scene is just making sure you always know your exit strategy. And so never allowing for, somebody who's escalated and heightened to get between you and the door, and being okay with the fact that you have to be safe. And so if that means you have to walk out of the house and leave them there, that's what you have to do.
Good point, Danielle. You have your hand up. Please feel free to chime in.
Thank you. And I don't mean to throw us off topic at all. I just want to put on and flag for you all presenting and sharing. There is a question in the chat that came from our Q&A, and I think it's a great question. And so the question is, did counties, did all of you that are on the panel this morning put out an RFP for software bids, or simply select one that seemed to work the best for your team and your counties? Just wanted to flag that. You don't have to answer it right this second, but just wanted to make sure you're all aware of that question.
Thank you, Danielle. We did not put out a specific RFP for the software equipment. We funded our contractors to do that. The funding, and then they, put it forth to us for approval. So we did some research and homework, but we didn't do a separate procurement for that.
Thank you.
Yes. And when we responded to San Diego's RFP, our internal IT department did the research for us. I'm not a technology expert, but I'm lucky. I'm working with some really good folks. And on our IT department, we just happened to have a volunteer fireman who had been doing it for like 20 years. So he was very familiar with emergency responses and systems that have worked and that he's worked with. He's in Northern California. So his input was very, very valuable. And he was the one that helped us find Beacon. But they did look at several companies. I just can't tell you which other companies they looked at.
And then we piloted and, trialed and aired some of the like smart devices that you spoke about for safety. So yeah, but the Beacons software has been really helpful. And then Exodus picked up on that too. And that's been helpful because they are able to, I think Megan spoke about this, but they can cover calls for each other. And that software makes it easy for us to be able to see where the vehicles are, but also for data tracking. For the county's perspective, the contractor has that. They're able to extract data and send it to us so we can track things like call response time and how long they're spending on a call and those kinds of details that will help us determine our need moving forward.
That helps answer that question. It was very well thought out, and know that you tried different things and figured out what works best for you. Also, really nice to hear that software is cross platforms and allow anyone to come to that area and gap. That's really important, especially as we know coverage can be tight and staffing issues can be challenging at times. So, thank you for that. The next two questions, I know we're almost at this hour, and it's been such a wonderful conversation. I want to make sure I at least ask, what does transportation of the clients look like in your area? And what does aftercare and follow-up potentially look like in your communities?
So I've actually experienced transportation different in each county. In San Luis Obispo County, the crisis team does the transportation, and with the outlier of, if somebody is erratic or just not compliant, then law enforcement gets involved to help with the transportation. There is a crisis stabilization unit there as well. And so transportation might be going to the CSU, it might be going to a medical hospital, to the PUF. In Madera County, transportation is done through the ambulance system. And so that was very different for me, going from transporting clients myself to a county that used another service for that. And it's very interesting because it becomes a collaboration rather than a directive. When you're the one doing the transport, you're making the decisions, versus when you pull in another agency, you're talking through what's going on with this specific person and what's the best next step for them. Another interesting piece with Madera County is our only hospital shut down about a year ago, well, less than a year ago. And so we had to figure out, where are we sending folks? And so our very kind neighbor, Fresno County, has been taking care of folks. But even with that, figuring out, okay, how are we having these conversations with the ambulance service of, can we bypass the medical clearance piece and send them to the CSC in Fresno County, rather than having them clog up the hospital system there. So it brought a whole new layer of questions and conversations, having another agency become involved towards the end of that process.
Yeah. And in San Diego, all the if we can stabilize in the field, we do. If transportation is necessary, we will transport them in our vehicles that have been upfitted to manage 5150 calls. So people can't just jump out of the vehicle mid-transport, whether they start as a 5150 or not. We don't want anybody getting confused and jumping out. So of our calls, only less than 3%. Bree will say in the chat less than 2%. She might be more accurate now. Our numbers change all the time. Where we have to ask law enforcement to assist us to transport somebody. So almost all of the calls we go on that we take someone to a CSU or an ED, we transport. And if we can't, then we're calling law enforcement for backup. Our local EMS ambulance service won't do that for us. They won't restrain somebody, if you will. So the only time we would call for law enforcement backup is if the person was on a hold, at risk for, they were going to hurt themselves or someone else, and they were unwilling to go. And we are non-hands-on. We don't hold anybody. We don't restrain anybody. We would call the police. And again, that's less than 2 or 3% of our calls.
I want to tack on a little bit more just about transporting. We also develop protocols around transporting as far as making sure that the client is aware what's going on. We too had the vehicles outfitted, so there was the plexiglass barrier between the front seat and the back seat, childproof locks and windows. So making sure they were aware you're not under arrest. You are going to be sitting in the back seat so that, you know, it's a safety standard for everybody who we transport. All of their belongings went into the trunk. So that way, you know, there was no special circumstances. It was just a protocol. We also kept, especially once COVID hit, we kept a pulse on needing to get the vehicles cleaned and sanitized and whatnot. And just making sure that the client feels safe, that the client feels like they know what's going on, that the safety standards are there for the person driving the vehicle as well. And then also that the whole situation is very clearly communicated of what's going on.
That's a wonderful ad right there with me, that it's really important to keep everyone client informed, or them informed of what their rights are, where they're going, what they're heading, and that they're not in any trouble at all. What a wonderful piece. I know we're getting close to almost at the end of session, and my partner just pinged me about 5 minutes ago, so I just want to move it first. Any aftercare follow-up strategies before we bring to a close? I want to be respectful of your time. And thank you all so much for what you've said and shared today. Grace, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we really use our peer support and our case managers a lot with the follow-up and aftercare, with the idea that they're coming back afterwards, and we try to do 24 to 48 hours to provide the follow-up service, checking in to make sure that the strategies that were discussed are remembered and implemented. Any appointments that were set up, that they have that on their calendar. We just started doing continued follow-up for our higher risk clients, so that, you know, maybe we check in on them 2 or 3 times in between their crisis contact and their next scheduled appointment to make sure that they're continuing in the more stabilized route.
And I'll just add on some of the San Diego follow-up. So we have a mandatory 3-day follow-up to every crisis service we provide. That can be done either on the phone or in person, depending on the situation and the need of the client. And then within our contract, we have a care coordination follow-up option where we can follow a case for up to 30 days post initial crisis intervention, to provide, you know, ongoing linkage to behavioral health services so we can stop the cycle of crisis. So we have that in place. That's for people who need it. It's not for every single client we serve.
For taking their time out of their busy day, knowing that people are still responding, everyone's still actually working and doing this in real time. It means so much to us and the county that we can all learn from each other. Thank you so much for the experience and expertise that you shared. I feel so much. It was really wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. And again, as Danielle said, we will we'll follow up with a written document of Q&A from anything that we didn't get to today. And we look forward to seeing everybody next month. And a special thank you to our presenters. It was so helpful. And we hope to have more sessions like this where we can really do this deep peer learning. So thank you to everybody and have a wonderful rest of your day.